Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Willie Lawson Show here on Blog Talk Radio. This is a show that changes your mind so you can change your community for the better. All right, welcome to the Willie Lawson Show here on Blog Talk Radio. We appreciate it. We are in the Space Opera Production headquarters. We're not in the studios today, but it's a very, very special show. It's a show that my guest today is Brandon Darby. Brandon Darby is known by a lot of names, but or a lot of titles. But for me, Brandon is the editor of Breitbart Texas, and is truly a voice for the conservative movement, and somebody who understands progressivism in a visceral way, somebody who really gets what they're seeing here in this country, and is able to define and delineate what most people see, as opposed to the things that are really going on. He's had some experience behind the scenes in the progressive movement. So there's probably no better voice in America than Brandon Darby about the subculture and the evilness of what's actually happening on the liberal side of the aisle. And I am honored to have him as my guest, and he'll be on in just a few minutes. This is going to be quite the week. We have Brandon Darby today. We have Robert Stacey McCain of the Other McCain on tomorrow, Tuesday, and Sonny Johnson on Wednesday. So it's going to be quite a ride for the next few days. So you know what? Hang in there with us. Tell your friends, because the idea is the more people who know, the more people who can listen, the more people who can react, the more people who can use this information to their benefit, the more communities we can change, and the sooner we can do that, because that's what this is all about. It's about changing your community. And the quicker we can do that, the better off we will all be, especially as the 2016 election cycle is bearing down on us at a high rate of speed. So you know what? It is going to be really, really important. It's going to be a great show. And if you're tuning in, Brandon's not here yet, but he's going to be here in a little bit. So tell your friends, tweet them, Snapchat, pin, tweet, whatever you have to do. Facebook, post, whatever you have to do. Let people know that Brandon Darby is going to be on the Willie Lawson Show in just a few minutes, and you don't want to miss Brandon's story, because this is a story that is just amazing. You know what? Every now and again, I get to meet somebody who I think of as great and important and amazing, and I got to meet Brandon at Right Online last Saturday. So we actually met, shook hands for the first time, and I just think that this young man is an amazing person. So listen, we're going to take a little break. We're going to take a break early so we can have some time to go forward, and we're going to play a few spots beforehand to get them out of the way, so we'll have plenty of time to listen to Brandon and talk to him. My name is Willie Lawson. This is the Willie Lawson Show here on Blog Talk Radio. We'll be right back. You have discriminating taste and an eye for the impressive. You need to surround yourself with not only beauty, but quality. That is why you are looking for a new construction home for you and your family. Let the experts at New Homes of Tampa Bay guide you to and through your new home purchase process. With access to hundreds of model homes throughout the Tampa Bay area, New Homes of Tampa Bay is sure to find that perfect match of budget and beauty you are looking for. New Homes of Tampa Bay can save you thousands of dollars while costing you nothing. Call us today before you start your new home search. New Homes of Tampa Bay at 813-770-9452 and at www.newhomestpa.com.
Only in the forest can you see this. And this. And this. But nothing beats the moment you see that.
Cool!
That's your child's eyes opening up to a world of possibilities.
I didn't know it could do that!
Because one trip to the forest can spark a world of difference.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go, like hiking, canoeing, fishing, or camping. Or create your own adventure with family and friends, and you might just see this. Your moment's out there. Find it at discovertheforest.org. That's discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
It's 6:42 p.m. Time for Steve Plotto and his son Dylan to do the dishes. They talk about everything from the yuckiness of girls to the awesomeness of his soccer team. Sometimes they don't talk at all. Then, hey, the dreaded splash fight. It's Dad o'clock, and it's the best time of the day because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Hey, parents of children with asthma, here's another hit from the Breathe Easies.
Come on and clean up the mold. Clean up the mold. Mold can trigger asthma in kids young and old. Come on and clean up the mold. Clean up the mold in your house.
This song may be fun, but childhood asthma is not. Preventing asthma attacks can be as simple as cleaning up the mold and mildew in your house. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org, brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
Getting your child home safely
Tap your views together 3 times.
is just a click away.
There is no place like home.
But making sure your child is in the right seat is just one of the steps down the road to safer travel.
I don't know how it works.
Find the right seat for your little one's age and size. There's no better way to get home safely. Know for sure that your child is in the right seat.
How can I ever thank you enough?
Get all the facts at safercar.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Hey, parents of children with asthma, here's the Breathe Easies with another one of your favorite hits.
Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke around the kids in the house. Don't smoke in the car. Don't smoke in the house. Don't break my heart with your secondhand smoke in the kids that get triggered asthma.
Preventing asthma attacks can be as simple as making your home and car smoke-free zones. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org or just keep listening.
Vacuum up the floor. Vacuum up the floor. Vacuum up the floor. The asthma trigger is the more. You gotta vacuum up the furniture and vacuum in the cracks because the dander and the dust can give kids asthma attacks.
Simple steps can help your kids breathe easier. Vacuum up the floor to keep your house free of dust, dander, and dust mites. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org, brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
Man, do I love card night. You ready, boys? You got a king?
Go, fish dad!
Oh, come on. This is WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov.
Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Welcome to the Willie Lawson Show here on Blog Talk Radio. This is a show that changes your mind so you can change your community for the better. All right, we're back. Thanks so much for coming today. We are blessed with a fantastic guest. Somebody who is going to change your mind about some things. I think. You know what? I did some research in the past few days about our guest, and my mind was changed. You know what? My whole experience last week at Right Online was a life-changing experience in the sense that when you talk to people who have been there, people who are in the trenches, people who see what you can't see from where you are, and they show it in such a bright, brilliant, clear light, it changes you. And I am changed. So without further ado, I had to bring on my guest, the editor of Breitbart Texas, Brandon Darby. Brandon, how are you this glorious afternoon?
Hey, I'm doing great. Just having fun, running a news site and taking care of all the things that need to be taken care of. I'm a single dad too, so I my daughter lives with me, and so each school morning I get up early and I do as much work as possible, and then at a certain time, man, I try to do hair. It's interesting, but it's kind of funny because I'll take her to school and sometimes the teachers will go, "Oh, how cute, you did her hair," and I'm like, "Thanks," So waffles or whatever, and then take care of business and get her to school, and then get back to the get back to work.
I understand. Most single dads, it is the hair that makes the difference. That's how you know that you've made it. When the teachers go, "Oh, that is so cute," and you go,
"No," but they weren't saying it like that. They weren't saying that is so cute. They were saying, "Oh, how cute, you did her hair." And then when I pick her up from school, her hair is different because the teachers fixed it for her. So I watch YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff trying to figure out how to do your daughter's hair, and it just doesn't work out for me.
It's a long road, man. I feel you. All right, listen. You know what? We got a chance to meet on Saturday at Right Online in D.C. And I tell you what, the panel that you were on, kind of a life-changing panel for me. I'm gonna tell you, because our friend Sonny Johnson, who was second speaking on the panel, James. This is the panel, y'all. This would have been worth the whole weekend. It was James O'Keefe, it was Sonny Johnson, and Brandon Darby in the same room. I'm telling you, if that's not a life-changing experience, then you're not looking for a life-changing experience. What I learned and how you touched me was part of your story that I've since learned more about is how you came to where you are. Because a lot of people who, if you put in Brandon Darby in the Google, what you'll find is FBI informant. Well, that doesn't tell nearly the whole story. It's not even close to the whole story. There's a lot.
Not at all.
There's a lot that led up to that particular, a crisis of conscience, I guess I could say, which is probably would that be correct?
That's correct. It's just a lot of experiences, but I had a lot of experiences that a lot of people don't get to have, and so, and then people say, well, you changed your ideology completely from left to right, and I'm like, not really. If you look at what I was saying in my interviews and in my speeches when I was on the left, I was really kind of saying the same thing I say now, for the most part, especially when it comes to how people in the world are helped, how communities who are suffering, how they are best brought out of that suffering. I really said the same things I say now. The thing is that I had a false understanding. I fell into the false notion, the false narrative that because I was so radical about helping other people, that meant that I was on the left. That meant that the other people who were so radical about helping were on the left as well. That's the false narrative that most people believe. They say, well, if you care about others, you vote left, you vote Democrat, and if you want to help rich white people, you vote Republican or you vote right. And I fell into that narrative. But over the course of life, and especially being starting a relief project in the Ninth Ward and the Lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans, which is, as you probably know, it's a good, very high percentage. It's a black population. It's very few white people at the time lived in that area, and it was really controversial on the left, and I couldn't understand that. I didn't understand why it was controversial to do things the way I did things, and what I was doing just by nature, by the fact that my skin was white. And I learned a lot from those experiences in New Orleans for a good 2.5 years. I learned a lot about the traditional groups on the left who, like if you go into any predominantly black community in the U.S. that is low income, because that's another misnomer. Obviously not all predominantly black neighborhoods in the U.S. are low income, but if you go into a neighborhood, you begin to see that there are certain people who are there, and they get all of the money and all of the resources for how that community is helped. There's nothing that happens in that community that person isn't somehow benefiting from. And what I found and learned was that oftentimes that person who is considered the leader in that black community, well, they might be considered the leader by a bunch of white academics or white liberals, but they're not considered the leader generally by the majority of the black residents in that neighborhood. And the people who are actually who I would consider the black leadership in that neighborhood, like the grandmas on each block or some of the pastors, because they don't pump their fist in the air and talk about Malcolm X, or because they don't push for Democratic votes or any party votes, because they're not political, even though they're the ones doing the hardest work and the most to help people, they don't have any resources or assistance. So I began to realize that. And I think that was the beginning of me, me changing my worldview to say, even though, like I said, my belief that local communities help each other better than a federal government can, and can better determine how to help their own, that's a right of center belief that I've always held. I just didn't know that it was right of center,
I understand. So you found you found the scam, because a lot of us who live in black communities, like I do, we were up on the scam a long time ago. That there are certain people who have been christened by white liberals and academia as the leaders in an area, and those are the people that and that somebody called, and I wish I had come up with this phrase, the go-to Negroes, whenever there's something going on in the black community that people need assistance, whether, of course, I live in Florida, whether it's a storm, whether it's social unrest, these are the people who always seem to have the organizations that are ready to be Johnny on the spot, and those are the people who get the funding, those are the people who get the media attention, when the fact of the matter is that most people who live in the community go, these people don't even show up until there's a problem. We never see them, we never hear them, they don't even live here. And you learned they don't even live there.
But it wasn't, but see, that was a God thing, though, because it wasn't because I had some deep perception or I mean, if I had shown up it's a very long story, but if I had shown up in a community and those people were there, I probably would have fell right into that too. But see, it was after Katrina, and so all of those people were gone. Acorn was gone. Those people were not there because it was filthy. There had been 20 feet of mud in some of the houses, and you had to live there without electrical power to be in, quote, solidarity with people. You had to walk door to door and talk to people, ask them what they needed, and say, hey, people are trying to take your homes, like they're trying to use eminent domain for private commercial development. You need to stay in your home. They're like, I can't stay in my home. Look at how messed up it is. And you're like, well, we're going to help you stay in your home, because if we can just get one of you to stay in your home on each block, they can't take any big swaths of land, like just get one of you to stay at your house. And so people did stay at their house. And so Acorn was gone, no Jesse Jacksons, no Al Sharptons. Everyone was gone except for residents, the average resident who would actually endure that to protect their community and help their community. The people who stayed behind, the few pastors who stayed behind to save people and make sure they had food and water, they were still there. And so when I showed up on the scene, I just started going door to door, knocking on doors and talking to people, and there just wasn't that many people. So I started putting this flyer on every door, and people started calling me as they came home, because I would see what would happen. People would drive back from Houston or wherever they were. They'd see their home, they'd cry, they'd get back in their car, and they'd leave. And I was like, wait a minute. So I started talking to them and making sure there was a note on that door for them. People started calling, and it worked. So for the first few months, I just anybody in the community who was there trying to help, I just worked with them. And so we had this whole process and this whole system developed around these people. Well, then a few months later, when the foundation dollars and the funders started flowing, all of these groups started to come back, and they're like, well, listen, now we're back. And I'm like, so? Great. Let me know how I can help. They're like, well, you can help. But from now on, you're going to work under us, and the money's going to come through us. And then we're going to determine how it gets distributed. And I said, well, I can't do that. I'm working with all these people who have been here the whole time. And they're like, well, then we're going to say that you're a white person in leadership who comes into our community and doesn't work with black leadership. And I was like, well, then I'm going to tell people the truth. And they're like, excuse me? And I'm like, the truth is that you weren't here the whole time. These people were. We are working with black leaders, just not you, not the self-appointed black leaders who really only have a bunch of academics and white radicals behind you. And that's the truth. Like, none of these people know who you are. That's why you're asking me who's back and give me my lists. And you're asking because you don't know. You haven't been on the street with these people. You haven't been there working. You're not the one who was here living on a dirt floor and on a muddy concrete floor in a house with no electricity and no sheetrock and no plumbing, having to go to the bathroom in a bucket of sawdust because you had no other option, simply because you had to stay in the neighborhood to show you were in solidarity and to help. You weren't here. And I'm going to tell everybody you weren't here. So then all of a sudden I found myself, I'm like, here I am doing something pretty radical to help people in a predominantly black community, and here I am working really with the counsel and leadership of all of these real black leaders who are doing amazing stuff. And then the people that I've always admired, who are the black leaders, that get the media attention and get the money, are over here trying to destroy me, knowing I'm doing good. They would rather that I wasn't there doing good and everybody still suffered than me be there and them not be the ones getting the credit, the money, or the glory. And that's when I began to see a problem. That's when I began to see a problem. And so I could tell you, I could go on and on for hours about examples of things that happen, not only in the black community, but also in the predominantly white communities who were showing up to help, because people they don't understand that. Like, people say, well, why was it mostly white people who showed up to help? And I'm like, well, for socioeconomic reasons. That's why, because not a lot of people can afford to run off from their world and their life and have their parents pay the bills, and not a lot of people can afford that. And the situation we're currently in, it's not that way universally, but there probably is a larger percentage of white communities right now who have that kind of familial resources built up, right? And so that's why that was. And so I could tell you tons of stories about that, and not only just about Acorn and, like I said, some of the black leadership, but tons of stories about what I learned from the activist communities. And so over time, it just became a very natural thing that I began to realize that, hey, something's different here, like there's something different about the way I'm looking at this. Like I noticed that most of the residents in New Orleans didn't even know that there was a storm coming. And I'm thinking to myself, how can you live in such an endangered area from a hurricane that gets so many hurricanes and not pay attention to whether or not a storm is coming? And when I figured that out, and that's because people have been indoctrinated to be completely dependent on government, to be completely dependent with their well-being, what they should do, what they need to worry about, what they need to care about, all being told to them. And so when people would say, we need the federal government, and I'd say, wait a minute, we don't need more federal government. The federal government being here is why there's stuff like this in the first place. Like we need less of that. We need communities we need to take this private donations we're getting and empower communities to do stuff on their own and to be more responsible and to listen to the freaking news radio or to, like, and know that there's a storm coming, or to take some responsibility so they can be empowered and not depend on a government who didn't show up in the first place, who left them to die in the first place. And so that's where, I began to have a lot of conflict with people. But my message was still the same message I say today, which is, people help people better than a federal government can. And I believe that, there's a liberal model. It's called people don't like to acknowledge it. They'll talk about the prison industrial complex or the military, but they don't like it when you say there's a nonprofit industrial complex in this country. It is predominantly funded with conservative dollars, yet it is run by and managed by, and the processes they use are all left-of-center processes and left-of-center people. And that's why you have situations like we had in Texas, where we had in the summers of 2011 or 10, I believe it was, maybe 10, but I think it was 11. We had a massive outbreak of wildfires, and a lot of suburban communities were left homeless temporarily. And the Red Cross came in and set up shelters, and they had these people who are used to living in their own home, in their own neighborhood, with their own yard, and they had them living on cots in these big gymnasiums. And so we began to organize Tea Party groups and organize churches and talk with folks and say, hey, why don't you let the 200 local churches from this county come, the pastors come in and see if they click with any of the families, so the families can maybe live with another family for a while, or you know what I mean, something where that everyone's not forced to live in this big gymnasium together with no privacy. And they said, these are ours. We know what we're doing. We're the Red Cross. And I'm like, that is a left of center model. That is like a couple of people far away who are superior intellectually, right, that they feel they are. They can better determine how to help a local area than the leadership in the local area, right? And that's a left of center model. And that is what dominates the nonprofit industrial complex. You have people say conservatives don't care enough, they don't get involved enough. And it's like, well, you don't really let conservatives get involved. You say, if you want to get involved, use my liberal model that's ineffective and shut up. And so people don't get involved. And so all you're left with are left of center people being involved. And then when other people who have the passion in their heart to help and better the world grow up into that, trying to help, they're only around left of center people. So they began to think, like, oh, hey, because I want to help people, I must be a liberal, I must be a Democrat, I must be left of center, when it's just not the truth. And I began to see that.
Wow, that's amazing. So I'm sure that you had some dealings while you were in New Orleans with the Mayor Nagin at the time?
Mayor Nagin, I did have some dealings. I tried to avoid him, though, because I always thought he was full of it, and it turns out I was right.
Yes. Okay, real quick, give me, because, dude, I would love to sit down with you for about 18 hours and just listen, because I can tell that your heart is full when talking about these issues, and there's so many examples. One example while you were in New Orleans that maybe led to you at the end of your time there deciding to go back to Texas. Can you share one of those with us?
Oh man, I actually try not to even think about that, because it was such a sad time in my life. I was so upset, by so many things. At that point, I had gone to Venezuela, and Hugo Chavez was going to give us money, and for Chavez trailers to embarrass the U.S. government, because they weren't giving out the FEMA trailers, and I had gotten back from Venezuela. When I got back after a month, it was complete anarchy had really reigned in all my projects. A lot of my local leaders who were doing projects, they were no longer doing them. They were all a bunch of predominantly, in fact, all white young transgender people who were in positions of leadership. The relationships with the community had suffered drastically. And what basically happened was a group of radicals decided to occupy the Ninth Ward, and so they put the call out and allowed, hundreds, if not thousands of people, ultimately thousands, to come and stay at this one facility. And really what it was is it was a predecessor to the Occupy movement. It was the same organizer, Lisa Fithian, who had organized it, the same little network of people. And they did the same thing that Occupy did. They acted the same way. Well, that didn't jive with the community. That didn't fit. The community wasn't cool with that, and at all. And it caused a lot of problems. So by the time I got back and I began to see that and just the decay that had happened, and I began to realize that none of the things I had tried to put in place were institutionalized, There were no checks and balances. If I left, it was a banana republic. If I left town for 2 days, they'd try to throw a coup and change everything and hurt everything. And, I ended up in a situation where I began to have a lot of respect for, say for our founding fathers, and the fact that we have this system with checks and balances, as imperfect as it is, right? And I began to not feel like I fit in. There was a million things that happened. A lot of things that happened, but long story short, I decided that it was time to go, and I went back to Texas, and I got a small piece of property with a house, and I started, I was having some issues fitting back into society for sure, to normal life, and I planted a garden, and I got some chickens, and I tried to really just leave that part of my life behind. But it was really hard because there I was, I wasn't a racist conservative at all, and I didn't like racist conservatives, but I also didn't fit in with the left anymore, and I slowly began to realize that I actually had a lot of what I believed in and fought for was really right of center. I began to realize that there was something about our system of governance, as imperfect as it is, and as much as people in different agencies can really make me mad, I began to realize that there was something to respect. So I never was ashamed of what I had done in New Orleans, but I was ashamed of my rhetoric. I was ashamed of my divisive, I had a lot of rhetoric that I really did blame. I took the left of center worldview that cops were bad, that the system, that our government was bad, and that most of the wrong in the world had happened because of us and our greed and our capitalism. And I began to slowly have to acknowledge that there were some, like for instance me, like I went to New Orleans and I gave up a reasonably successful, for me, small concrete staining business when I went. And I went and my resources helped found it and my time, and I put the time in to learn and invest in that organization. But then these people would show up and they would demand, these people from the far left, all these activists, and they would demand the same access to decision-making and resources that I had, even though they didn't have any skin in the game, And I always thought that was absurd, like the consensus process or the social. I was like, well, why should I share that with you when I'm the one who took all the risks to start this? I'm the one who has the relationships here. You just showed up. Why should you be entitled to that? It's like, well, you're a white male in a position of power, and I'm a transgendered young person, and it's unfair that I don't get equal say with you. And it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that ain't going to happen, And so I began to realize that I was, I began to realize that there was some legitimacy to why we don't have socialism or some, hippie version of a consensus process in society, or why Americans don't live like the Zapatistas with a consensus model of governance. And I began to realize that there was something to that. So all these million things went on, but I came back and I was pretty discouraged. But when I did come back, and that's where the FBI informant stuff comes in, is when I did come back, a lot of those people from the left of center world, especially international people, a lot of them were actually involved in a lot of really bad stuff. So on the outside they helped people, but on the inside, they were doing things like sending money to suicide bombers, and so I turned them in, and that's how my relationship with the FBI began, and I was proud of doing that too, and make a long story short, when that ended, and I had to testify in a trial, and people on the left of center world found out that I had decided to work with the FBI, they decided to destroy me, and they tried to, and the highest halls of the highest editorial rooms in the country tried to, and that's ultimately how I met Andrew Breitbart. He heard them attacking me, and he got a hold of me and said, fight back, bro. And I said, I do fight back. He goes, why don't you? I was like, I do fight back. They won't print what I say. They're lying. And he's like, well, I've looked at this, and this isn't right. And I'm like, thank you. I know it's not right, but I can't do a damn thing about it. And then he said, well, you can, I'm starting a website, and you can work with me, and you can use my website to fight back. And that's how this all began, really.
It's interesting. Whoever controls the narrative controls the argument, and it seemed like, and what Brandon is saying, some of the most important editorial places in the country are places like New York Times and the like, people like that who control the narrative, regardless of what the truth is. That's completely unimportant. If I could back up a little bit, I want to talk about the 2008 was it 2008 Republican National Convention. I guess it was in Minneapolis or Minnesota somewhere. St. Paul.
St. Paul, well, it's like the Twin Cities, right?
Yes.
They're right next to each other, St. Paul, Minneapolis.
So tell me how all that went down, because that was the genesis of the court appearances and the like.
Well, there was a lot more to it than that. I mean, you know, at that point I had been working undercover for some time, and with the FBI, that was just one investigation. And in that investigation, there was, you know, again, those same people, the same communities of people who showed up and tried to occupy New Orleans and later went on to occupy Zuccotti Park and do what they did. Those same communities of people, you know, they began to organize across the country, and which is their right to do. But what isn't their right to do is they began to organize with the explicit stated goal of shutting down the Republican National Convention by any means necessary. That's where law enforcement got involved. Because when you do that, you know, like you have the right to protest, but other people have a right to assemble and discuss their political views and to celebrate their political views. So when you start to threaten violence, arson, property destruction, and mayhem, and you say, I'm going to shut this down by any means necessary, well, that's when those other Americans have a right to have law enforcement protect their right. That's where what happened there. And so in the process of that investigation, you know, different groups of people made bombs in an effort to shut down the convention. I found out about the bombs because I was undercover, and I told the FBI about the bombs, and about two of the bomb plots. One of them they handled, some other, you know, person undercover dealt with. But you know, one of the guys pled guilty. The other guy decided to try his luck, and he said, you know, I didn't do it, or the FBI planted him, and then they found out I was the one undercover. So the narrative just slowly kind of shifted until he had a pretty good defense for himself, and it started. That's when all hell really broke loose.
You know, I was watching a video that you did a couple of years ago while you were in Florida, and and you mentioned a plan that they talked about while you were at one of these meetings that you were in, they asked you to go in undercover, and I thought that people would be interested to find out how tactical, because I think that people think that the left is sort of emotional and soft and jiggly, but how tactical some of these people really are. And you mentioned her name a little bit ago. It had to do with three, and as I remember it, I watched the video last night. It had to do with
red, yellow, and green.
Exactly.
Yeah, red, yellow, and green.
Explain to my listeners what that meant in that particular instance and how tactical these people actually are.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is what they do in every demonstration. It's not in any mass demonstration. So what they do is they divide the organizers of the events. They divide. There's always like the peaceful organizers, and then there's the radical organizers, and they're really talking to each other, right? But they don't openly talk. They don't openly interact. So the peaceful people always go, "We're not part of those anarchists. That's not part of us. We're mostly peaceful," you know. And the anarchists always act separate, but they're really organizing each other. For instance, in that particular case, a group named United for Peace and Justice organized the peaceful, nonviolent protest to the Republican convention of 10,000 people, right? Well, that sounds great, United for Peace and Justice. Well, someone on the steering committee, Lisa Fithian, for that group, she then organized the anarchists, right? And the Black Bloc. So you have the same group organizing the peaceful demonstrations and the violent demonstrations, okay? The dangerous ones, the criminal ones. So what she did is she said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this city. Here's the Excel Center where the delegates have to go in order to choose a presidential candidate for the Republican Party. So in order to get to the Excel Center, they have to bring buses up one of these 5 arteries. So what we're going to do is block those 5 arteries. Well, the cops aren't going to let us block those 5 arteries. So we're going to divide the protests up, and we're going to have, you know, X percentage of people at each artery. Now, in that group of people, the green group, there's all these people who are just there to protest. They would never break the law. If we told them they were going to break the law, they wouldn't show up. They're just decent people. We're going to have those people there with our group leaders organizing the protest, and then we're going to have two other groups. So we're going to have the yellow group, and that's going to be the group that chains themselves up across the road so that buses can't come through. But law enforcement isn't going to let the yellow group chain themselves up. And the yellow group is the ones who are going to get arrested. They know they're going to go to jail for civil disobedience, right? They're the arrestable group. So what we're going to do is have the group leaders encourage everybody out into the street. So let's cross the street. And they start crossing, stop, and then they're going to stop and block the road, right? Well, then the police are going to tell them to get out of the road, and they're going to get out of the road because they're law-abiding citizens. But that's going to give the yellow group time to lock down and buckle down and chain themselves up and under the cover of the green group, even though the green group doesn't realize they're being used to cover for the yellow group, right, for the criminal behavior. And so if the green group gets out of the road too quick and that doesn't give the yellow group time to lock down, well, then that's when the red group comes in, the black bloc anarchists. They're going to come in with masks on and riot shields, and they're going to attack the police. And then between the green group and the red group, that's going to give the yellow group time to lock down. Well, then the red group's going to flee, and they're going to mix into the crowd of the green group. So then the police are going to go after them and go after the green group, right, which is now the crowd with the red group in it too. And then all the people in the green group, it's going to look like the police are attacking nonviolent protesters. All the people in the green group are going to think that they were nonviolent and that for no reason the police went after them and threw tear gas at them. And the yellow group's locked down. And then when it's all said and done, everyone can say, yeah, there were some people doing this with police, but it wasn't us. It wasn't our group. And that's how they organized that shutdown. It's a brilliant way to organize it. It's red, yellow, green. And the whole time, the mass of people had no idea they were being manipulated to cover for the illegal behaviors of these cop attackers.
It sort of seems like that's what Ferguson looked like.
It's because you know why Ferguson looked that way? Because Lisa Fithian was in Ferguson organizing it.
Well, there you go.
Same person.
That's apparently her fingerprint. Because it looked like that. Because and I had some friends who were there, and they reported back to me that there were some good people there who were from the community, who were peaceful, who were just trying to get their voices heard, who were law-abiding, who were following as best they could the directions of law enforcement, and then it seemed like all hell broke loose.
That's why it breaks loose. That's what happens. And so, and it's not to say there aren't law enforcement who abuse their power, because there are. We know there are. Mm-hmm. We know it's not the majority, but we know that those people exist in any field, right? It's just that most fields don't have people with guns who can hit you. So we know those people exist, and it's not to say they don't, but the vast majority of law enforcement is not that way. And generally, if they're going at a crowd, you're going to notice it happens right after there was a violent attack, and the crowd mingled in with the group of that's part of the strategy, and that's how it happens. And so not only does the crowd not know it, but law enforcement generally doesn't realize that that's what's going on. And that's what's sad. The FBI knows that's what's going on, and the intelligence divisions of a police department would know what's going on if they had proper work beforehand. But in general, they don't know what the average officer on the street doesn't realize that that's what they do.
Well, it seems to be like there's some training issues. You know what, Brandon, you spent some time with a person that all of us who do this independent media gig feel like we knew. We didn't. Even if we met him, we all feel like we knew Andrew Breitbart. I'll tell you what. I'm telling you why I had to talk to you, and I'm going to talk to Sonny on Wednesday, is because the very first real interview that I did. I did on terrestrial radio was with Andrew Breitbart, and I was horrendous, and he was gracious and fabulous. I cringe when I listen to that interview now. He had just brought his kids back from rock and roll camp, and he was amazing. And so you felt like, he made you feel like, you're doing okay. You just keep going. It was so encouraging. And when I met him in Orlando, same thing. and I know this is a sort of a TMZ kind of question, and I apologize in advance.
Go ahead. It's okay.
What was it like to be around somebody who, you know what, when you meet somebody who is great, you know, they treat you in a way, you just know there's something special about this individual. What was it like to work with Andrew on a daily basis?
You know, I spent a quarter of the time doubting him and finding out I was wrong later, and when he had a way to do things, and I spent 75% of the time just utterly in awe, you know, just utter awe about the man had such a brain. But it wasn't just his brain. You know, a lot of people have a brain. I mean, you know, a lot of people have a good brain, and, you know, they're 2 or 3 times smarter than me, and I know they are, you know, and he was, and I could tell he was. And there's a lot of people who are smarter than me, though. I mean, that's not hard to accomplish. But what he did that was so interesting is, and it's so different, the thing that he did that was so different was that he didn't build himself up at all. Like, he would get on a stage and he would talk about me and Sonny and Anita Moncrief, and he would just talk about all the other people that people needed to support and their stories. And he would do it all the time. And you're like, man, you got to promote yourself. And he's like, no, the way I promote myself is I promote other people. You know, that's what I do with my name recognition. And most people don't do that. So he had this passion. Like, if you were a grassroots group and you asked him to come talk, I mean, he would really try to come talk. He couldn't always do it, but he very rarely said no. And if you were a larger group and you were like, hey, you know, we'll pay you, you know, like, I remember there was an issue where a certain speakers bureau wanted to have him under their wing and pay him a lot of money per speech, but he couldn't speak in between, and he wouldn't do it, you know. So here was this guy starting a company, didn't have a lot of resources at the time, and he turned down a bunch of money because it just meant too much to him to talk to the grassroots. That's what he was all about. And so he took people like me who, you know, I didn't go to college. I didn't even go to high school, man, you know. And I didn't finish high school. Like, I started 9th grade, but I never finished. And he like, I never finished 9th grade, you know. And he would take someone like me and he'd say, man, you got to write. And I'm like, I don't know how to write. And he's like, doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, it does matter. It's embarrassing as hell if I try to write something. He goes, no, I have editors. They'll work with you. We'll teach you. It'll be okay. In a couple of years, you'll get it. And I'm like, dude, okay. And so you start writing. They work with you, and they tell you why they did this change and what, and how you should have structured it differently. Like, it was almost like his editors were you know, English teachers or something, right? And he didn't care. And he would always say, you know, it's easier to find people with the right heart than it is to find people with the right skill set and then give them the right heart. It's much easier to give people the skill set. And that was his attitude, and that's what he did. And so he went around promoting everyone else and, like, defending everyone else. And then he like would just do everything in the world to, like, I mean, like me today, man. Like I was always a blue-collar guy, and I did, you know, for probably because of just my conversational skills and my attitude, I tend to organize very well in communities where they need some help organizing, you know. And other than that, that's what I have. I have no degree. I have no – and I'm the editor of a news site, and we do really well. We're very competitive. We're a very large and growing news site. And it's like, well, how does that happen? It happened because somebody took the time, like Andrew took the time. You know, he took the time to teach me the skills he knew I needed, because I always felt like somebody must feel who's illiterate, you know? Like I felt like I have all this stuff in me I want to say, you know, and I want to put out, and I want to create, and I want to write. I just don't know how to do it, and he really helped to teach me how to do it, man. And it was kind of it was kind of one of those deals where, you know, it's kind of funny because people often, this shocks people when I say this, but probably the two people who really helped me the most when it came to what I do now. You know, when I first got to New Orleans, I could not speak. I did not know how to give an interview. I did not know how to I just didn't know how to do that. And there was this former Black Panther named Malik Rahim who hates me now because I'm an enemy and I'm FBI and all, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't care that he hates me now. I don't hate him now, And yeah, his politics, I don't agree with his politics. But he taught me how to talk and how to give an interview. And he was very influential on me. His attitude about helping was very how to help people. And that group, as much as we can hate their politics and hate all the other mistakes about the former Panthers, not the new ones, but there's a lot I learned from those guys, and especially Malik. And then after that, it was Andrew. So those two people are really the biggest influences on how I do what I do. Is Andrew and this former Panther. Go figure, right? Go figure. But that was Andrew, and Andrew knew that, and Andrew thought that was brilliant. He liked that, and he was okay with that, And so that's when you say, what was it like to be around him? I mean, there's not a lot of people who were really close to him who, if you ask him about him now, don't start to get teary and have a hard time talking, because he was just that good of a person in their lives, He found the downtrodden people who were being done unfair, done wrong. And he said, I'll make you whole, or I'll give you a voice. And he did that. And he did that for so many people, not just me. It wasn't like something was special about me. There were so many people he did that for. And that's why I think you see the people who knew him still, love him so much and miss him so much. It's because we're in a world now where there's just not a lot of people like that. And even I try to be like that to people, but I fail, man. I fail all the time, I disappoint people all the time, or I really do, or I don't call people back all the time, but he somehow, running that empire he ran, he would call everyone back. He just had, somehow he had 100 hours a day to be on the phone and encouraging people, and I don't have that. So I like I said, I try to follow that model, but I fail miserably, So I hope that sheds a little light on to what that was like.
Oh, and it's funny, man. It's just what I thought it was. I'm usually a pretty good judge of folks, and the way that we set that interview up a few years ago, and the way that he treated me on the phone, and the way that he called back, and all that stuff was like, you know what, you're important. He didn't know me from Adam's House Cat. I was on this little radio station here in Tampa, WGUL, nobody had ever heard of, and he was like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. I called him up on the cell, and he said, that'd be great. When do you want me to do it? And he was so accommodating that I knew that this is not an individual who was doing it for me, because, dude, I am nobody special. Most people look at me and go, who the hell are you and where'd you come from? and I don't have a really good answer for them. I said, I'm just me, and I came from home. So that's exactly kind of what I expected. That being around somebody like Andrew Breitbart was that, and more importantly, he has imparted that very same thing, that very same desire in a lot of us to be that kind of individual. So that's the important part of the Breitbart legacy, which needs to be the next movie, by the way. So get the powers that be on that. I think that would be a fabulous idea, because there is a legacy. And there are some great people who are involved, including yourself, by the way. So just say thank you. Who are involved in, that legacy that is going to make the change that the country needs so desperately. To wake up folks in all our communities to say simply, the message is very simple. I think, like Brandon, your message is very simple. We can help each other quicker, better, more effectively, more long-lasting than a bloated, politically driven government from Washington, D.C. or your state capital. We are better to help our neighbor who lives next door across the street than anybody else. We know more about them. We know what they really need. We know how to get to them what they really need. And that seems to be a message that I think will resound anytime and anywhere. This is not political. This is not about, we need Republicans instead of Democrats. We need people who understand that without the motive that some of the people that you mentioned have, who are behind the scenes, some of the shadowy figures behind the scenes. All right, Brandon, tell me what's next for Breitbart.com. What's next? What's the next big thing?
Well, I focus on Breitbart, Texas, and obviously, the front page of Breitbart is a culmination of all the verticals, So I focus on Texas. So we're starting a podcast with the Border Patrol guys, with the Border Patrol agents,
cool.
On the Texas border, and we're just we're stepping up our game when it comes to border issues, when it comes to communities. One of the projects we're gonna get into. I'm not going to get into a bunch of detail on it right now because it'll curse the project. But we're gonna start to bring a lot of attention to situations in low-income communities across the state. We're going to start to bring a lot of attention to not only the situation in those communities, but on people and groups who are trying to do something about it. So we have a healthy mix of sex, drugs, violence, and helping. Like we just the news really, like everything that goes on in our world. And so we're just constantly stepping it up, and we've done really well. So we're able to grow and just always trying to look for the right people to do that with. So that's what we have coming up. I mean, we have so many different things. One of the I can't even begin, but we have good stuff coming. Our next year is going to be better than our previous, I think, and our previous was pretty dang good.
That's what it's all about: constant and never-ending improvement. That's what it's all about. Well, Brandon, I am honored. I feel like I've stepped it up a level, that I'm in a different place now because I've gotten a chance to talk to you, and I know that sounds but it's the truth. I feel like I'm somewhere else, like I'm somebody else, that I've taken the next step to where I'm supposed to be. Thank you again for spending a little time with us. I appreciate it greatly. And if there's anything that I can do from here, please know that all you have to do is ask. That's it. It's real easy.
Same here.
I make it real easy. Here. Just ask me. That's it. And
thank you.
You're very welcome. And to the best of my ability, I am on it. That's all you have to do. All righty. Listen, thanks so much for coming. Listen, go out there and continue to be productive, be prosperous. Watch those YouTube videos. Listen, don't let that hair get too long. If it gets too long, it gets unruly. So see if you can convince yourself a little shorter cut. They're a lot easier to deal with. Keep it natural. See, I'm married to a black woman. Keep it natural if you can. Keep those chemicals out of her little head, and that'll make it so much easier in the long run. God bless you and your family and your endeavors, and thank you again for coming to the Little Austin here on Blog Talk Radio.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, good night. All righty. That's Brandon Darby, Breitbart, Texas, on the show. I am telling you, I'm not the same. I'm just not the same guy. I'm not the same. When I hear someone like Brandon who saw the progressive ideology, who saw it and was able to look through it, because what do we always say here? The left will always show you who they are. And this false narrative that keeps being driven by the left, if you're somebody who loves people and wants to help, then you must be on the left. We're going to do a show on iHeartRadio tonight concerning that very same topic. How to stop that narrative and how we continue to stop that narrative. All right, we got to get out of here. Thanks for coming to the Will Austin Show here on Blog Talk Radio. It has been fabulous. It's been wonderful. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow, where my guest will be Robert Stacy McCain of the Other McCain website. Until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, take care of yourself. We'll see you when we see you. Welcome to the Willie Lawson Show here on Blog Talk Radio. This is a show that changes your mind so you can change your community for the better.